Hello everyone, welcome back. It is time for my best books of 2024. I am going to give you a few honorable mentions and then we will get into my top 15 best books of the year. I had 3 books that I just wanted to mention as honorable mentions. Now, these were ones that didn't make my top 15, but they were ones that I really enjoyed. And I believe in this case, I gave 2 of them I had given 5 stars, and one of them I rounded up to 5 from 4.5. So the first one that I wanted to mention is this one here. It is called Song of the Vikings, Snorri and the Making of the Norse Myths by Nancy Marie Brown. This book is a nonfiction. It is about the Icelandic skald who wrote the sagas that we now get most of our Norse mythology from. His name was Snorri Sturluson, and he lived in, I believe it was the 1300s in Iceland. And this is essentially the story of his life. He was a chieftain as well as being a skald or a poet. And he led a very interesting life. He was very crafty and gained power that way, and it also eventually led to his downfall. Hi, Pumpkin. I've got Pumpkin here. He's another, one of the cats. He's climbing into my bags. You've seen him in my outside videos sometimes because he's the one that does go outside sometimes. But anyways, she also, in this book, she weaves in bits of the sagas themselves and the mythology with the story. So anyways, I'm not going to talk too long about these honorable mentions, but this one, I really, really love her writing. I love the bit of humor that she uses in her writing, as well as just the style of it. And I do definitely want to read more of hers. I do have one other book of hers on my shelf, and I'd like to get more and read more of her books. The second honorable mention is one that I just finished this month, and that is Blood of the Old Kings. It's by Sung-Il Kim, translated by Anton Her. This one is a fantasy written by Sung-Il Kim, who's Korean. It's a world where there is an empire that has taken over, and they use the bodies of dead sorcerers to power their kingdom. And this is about 3 different people. One of them is a woman who is a swordswoman whose family has been murdered by the empire. Another one is a young man who lives in the capital and tries to help people. And then there is a girl who is a sorceress who is trying to escape the fate of the sorcerers in this world. So anyways, I really enjoyed this. The writing was really engaging, and I loved the characters. I kind of fell in love with them, and just the world was really interesting. I liked the dragon and how that played out, and just the whole magic system was super interesting. So that's why I wanted to give this one an honorable mention. The second one does come out late next year from Tor Books, and that is one of my most anticipated books of next year. So I then also wanted to mention The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett. That one, I don't have a copy of it because I got it from the library, but I read that one for my mixed media vlog, which I'll link to in the corner. And that one was one of my first chances reading mixed media. And I really enjoyed going along and solving the mystery along with everybody else. Pumpkin the cat is very noisy if you hear him in the background. I enjoyed solving the mystery, and it did take some twists that I was not expecting. And it was a very, very interesting book. It had to do with cults and an event that had happened 18 years before, and then these journalists trying to find the child that had gone missing 18 years before. And it was a very well-written book, and I'm really looking forward to trying more Janice Hallett. Okay, now let's get into the top 15 books that I read in 2024. So coming in at number 15 is one that a lot of people will have seen, and that is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This book follows Ernest Cunningham. He's our narrator and author. Ernest has a really good voice. This book follows him and his family. They go out to a ski resort for a family reunion of sorts because his older brother has just gotten out of prison. However, the person whose testimony put his older brother into prison was Ernie's testimony. So Ernie has a little bit of trepidation about this visit, in case you didn't guess. But his whole family is there, so it's, I believe, I'm trying to remember, it's his brother, his ex-wife, his brother's ex-wife, his mother, stepfather, stepsister. So all these people are there at this resort. But the first night that they're there, a body is found on the ski hill, and it's pristine white snow around the body, but the body looks like it's been burnt. There's soot all over on the face. So it's a mysterious death. It does involve a snowstorm hitting and everybody being trapped. So it's kind of a locked room mystery. And I really, really enjoyed the writing style. I like how Ernie, the narrator, breaks the fourth wall and is talking to us as the reader, because it's very obvious in the story that he's writing this mystery story. And he'll tell you things like, on page, if you're looking for the deaths, look ahead on page this, and this. And, just things like that. And it's a really fun read, but it also was a little more serious than I was expecting in the end. I really liked the characters, and there were some twists in the mystery that I didn't see coming. Definitely the final twist got me. So I highly recommend this one, and that came in at my number 15. Number 14 is one that I don't have with me because I took it out from the library, and that is episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. Now, I read this one again for my mixed media vlog, which I have linked before. It follows a group of paranormal investigators named Matt and Claire Kirkland, and they have a show called Fade to Black. So there's Matt and Claire, and then there's a young woman who's actually an actress who is paid to be on this show to kind of add color and spice to it. And then there's a guy who handles all the camera work, and then there's an older ex-cop who is also part of the team. They go to this derelict old mansion where the Paranormal Research Foundation used to have its headquarters. And in the 1970s, they had done a bunch of experiments on people trying to figure out how the mind worked and everything. And then mysteriously one day they all disappeared. And so it's this mystery involving that, and the place is said to be one of the most haunted places in America. So this team goes in there to do this investigation, and very quickly things go crazy with the haunting, and it starts to take more and more interesting turns. I really enjoyed the way it was told in mixed media. It was told in mixed media from the point of view of, there was journal entries, and a lot of it was video transcripts, because of course they're recording the whole thing for their show. So that part was really, really interesting, and I found it very engaging the way it moved from part to part. I also thought that the characters themselves were really interesting. There was lots of depth to them, which was good. I did not see where the twists were going, but it was getting crazier and crazier as it went. And I had it pegged for the majority of the story at a 4-star for me. It wasn't going to be a 5-star. It's not my normal style of book. I don't read a lot of books about paranormal stuff, although I do like watching I used to like watching Ghost Hunters, and I like watching the TV shows on YouTube with the paranormal people sometimes. But I wasn't sure what I was thinking of this book, and I had it kind of pegged at a 4-star because it was really good writing, until the final scene. The very final scene of the book, I was just absolutely shocked, and I ended up closing the book and going, that's a 5-star. So it was very interesting, and I am curious to try a little bit more of Craig DeLuey's writing. It is a horror, as well as being a mystery thriller. And so I'm not 100% sure, because I don't read a lot of horror, But I do want to try another thing of his and just see. Coming in at number 13, we have The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. This is another one that I just finished reading this month. I really enjoyed this book. Anthony Horowitz, who is the writer, also writes himself into the book as the main character. He is, in the book, he is a writer, and he gets contacted by this man named Daniel Hawthorne, who's a disgraced detective. The story starts with this woman named Diana Cowper. She walks into a funeral parlor to plan her own funeral, and then 6 hours later, she is murdered. So, of course, this is very curious, and the police are having trouble figuring out if it is, more than just a robbery or something, or what happened, if those two things are connected, all those sorts of things. So they call in this disgraced police detective who is very, very good at his job, and they kind of give him the weird cases. And so that's who he is. But he wants Anthony to write a story about his life because he wants to make money on the story. It's not about his life so much as about the case. He's the Holmes and he wants a Watson. So that's kind of the general gist of the story. I really enjoyed the writing. Anthony Horowitz's writing is very humorous, as well as being just super easy to read. So the mystery itself was very entertaining, as well as the big twist at the end I didn't guess. So that was cool. And I really loved his descriptions when he was writing the descriptions of the various people and just the turns of phrase that he used. I found that really fun to read, and I'm definitely looking forward to continuing this series. And also I want to check out his other one with the Magpie murders and everything. So that one came in at number 13. At number 12, we have Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is a fantasy story. It's the first in a trilogy. It's the Farseer trilogy. This story follows Fitz, he starts the story out as just a young boy. I think he's like 5 years old. And he is the bastard son of one of the princes of this kingdom. Pumpkin, why are you making so much noise? Can you be quiet? He's the bastard son of the heir to the throne of this kingdom. And his grandfather, who he doesn't remember from his mother, takes him and drops him off at the palace or the keep, and essentially says, he's your problem now. So this leads to his father abdicating his right to the throne and all this sort of thing. And so Fitz is raised in the palace. He's raised in the stables for a long period of the time and then moves into the keep. And he has kind of a tenuous position because being part of the royal family, but he's a bastard child. So he doesn't have the same rights as them, but they're afraid that he might turn into, as he gets older, have a claim to the throne. So they want to, nip that in the bud. And so he ends up getting trained by the royal assassin to be an assassin. This is a really interesting story. I really like the connection that Fitz has. There's a connection that he has with animals, which is something that I really enjoy in the story, even though it leads him to all kinds of troubles. I also like the whole magic system with the ability of certain people to talk to others through their mind, and they call it the skill. And it's just overall the world was really good. But what really got me was the character. I by the end of this one, I fell in love with Fitz. And I can't wait to see what happens next in the series. I'm hoping to read the next 2 books in this trilogy next year. She has a whole series of books that is set in this same world, the realm of the Elderlings. So that one made my list at number 12. Moving on to number 11 is another one that I don't own yet, but I'm going to buy. And that is The Red Palace by June Her. This is a young adult, which will surprise you considering what I said about young adult books previously in various vlogs. But this one is a historical. It is set in the Joseon dynasty in Korea, and this one is set in the mid 1700s. It follows a young woman. She's 18. Her name is Hyun, and she is a palace nurse. She is the daughter of a lawmaker, but she's a bastard daughter. So she has very few options open to her. They're kind of like the lowest of the low in this society. But she ends up training to become a nurse, and she gets in at the palace. However, the one night she's on her way home and she comes across this grisly scene where 4 nurses at this school where she used to attend have been murdered. And the police are there now and they're looking into it. But she starts kind of looking into it as well because her mentor is the one being blamed for the murders. And she does not believe that her mentor would have done this. So she decides she's going to look into it. And that brings her path across a young man named Ojin. And he is a young police inspector. So the two of them start working together to try and figure out what actually happened. And this isn't a spoiler because it's actually in the blurb of the book. The signs all start pointing towards the crown prince being responsible. And this is a big deal and a big problem. So that's kind of the premise of the story. I really fell in love with the characters again. In this case, they were young. They were both around 18. But because it's a historical setting, number one, they were more grown up than what an 18-year-old would be nowadays. And they were written well that way. They were written in a more grown-up manner. But also, you could imagine them getting into these situations because people did grow up so much faster back then. So by 18, most young women were married. She wasn't because of her position, but by that age, most young women would have been married in the world. So I find that I can handle a young adult a lot better when it's historical. I also really found the setting and the time period to be super intriguing. I am really interested in Korea in general because I'm a fan of BTS, and so I hear them talking about their own history and everything. The crown prince related to this story is actually knowing the history. I knew a bit of the history because of one of Suga's songs. His song Deshuta makes reference to a certain aspect of something that happened with this crown prince after this period. And so I found that really cool, that kind of link there, which was just kind of neat. But I love the time period and really enjoyed the setting. She's a very good writer. She really put you in that world and made it seem to come alive to you, because it's a time period and a place that in particular that I haven't read about before. And so she made it all come alive with all like the outfits that they would have worn, and everything was very clear to me. So that was really cool. I really thought it was excellent writing. And I'm going to show you guys now. This chonky little lady is Little Pepper. So this is chonky Little Pepper. You can see she's grown a lot since the last videos that I showed you guys. Look at her fluffy tail. She doesn't like being held for too long though. Right, Peppy? Otherwise known as Peppa Pig. Pepper. Huchu, which is Korean for black pepper. Okay, Peppa. There you go. Okay, so coming in at number 10 is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I loved this book. I really did. It follows a woman named Emily Wilde, who is a professor at Cambridge. And she is doing research. Her field is dryadology, so the study of fairies. And in this world, that's a perfectly normal and acceptable profession because everybody knows they exist. And she is in the process of writing this Encyclopedia of Fairies. She has one chapter left to finish, one entry left to finish to complete her encyclopedia. So her research takes her to the far north, to a small village called Ravensvik, where she is searching for these, I think, what do they call them? The lost ones or something like that. Anyway, but she's such a fun character because she has no social skills. She is so focused on her work, and she is not used to having to talk to people. So it's really funny when she has to try and interact with the townspeople, and she's doing a terrible job of it until her office mate slash nemesis slash kind of frenemy, whose name is Wendell Bumblebee, shows up. And much to her annoyance, he shows up to help her. And she and Bumblebee have such good banter between the two of them, and it's just such a fun story. Like the especially that banter. I just love the banter between them. It was cozy in a way, but it still had a good plot. And so that's where, as opposed to like just a regular cozy fantasy with less plot and more about just relationships between people and stuff, that I found a little bit boring. This one I didn't find boring at all because there was a good plot to it. And I loved the characters. They were so much fun. Part of the story is involved with not only Emily trying to find the fairies and stuff, but her also trying to like solve the mystery of Bumblebee. He is he's quite the character. I do have to say that the audiobook for this one is very, very well done. I loved the accent of the lady who was doing it, who was playing Emily. And it's told as journal entries for her journals. And so I really, really enjoyed the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook for 80%, and then I ended up having to take it back to the library. So I had to take out the physical book and finish. But I'm definitely looking forward to reading the next one in that series. At number 9, coming in at number 9, we're getting into that top 10 now here. We're at number 9 already, was A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell series, which has become very popular on BookTube. And I, again, really enjoyed this one. It's right up my alley for the type of mystery stories that I love to read. I've always loved to read. So in this one, you're following Veronica. She has been raised by 2 aunts that and she was raised in kind of a different sort of life where they moved from village to village. And this is set in Victorian times. They moved from village to village, and she never had a proper education, but they educated her by, essentially letting her learn whatever she wanted to learn. And she really took to butterflies. And so she became a lepidopterist. So she travels the world finding rare butterflies for collectors. So this is the life that she's kind of lived. And at the beginning of the story, her last remaining aunt dies. So she is essentially now free to go and travel the world and do whatever she wants with no ties back home. She knows that they weren't actually her aunts, so she's not actually related to them, but she was a foundling. So she ends up going home to the cottage where they lived, and here it's being ransacked by this guy, and he tries to kidnap her. She fights back, but she is rescued, sort of. She's doing a fairly good job on her own, but she's rescued by this baron who says that he knows her mother and will tell her some things, but only after he's sure that he should, kind of thing. So he ends up taking her to London and putting her in the care of his friend Stoker. And Stoker is a taxidermist. And Veronica and Stoker, their banter and the way they butt heads all the time, but have that bit of tension between them because they're attracted to each other, is so much fun. It totally reminded me, I've always loved these kind of over the top mysteries set in Victorian times with, very independent women. I just, that's my jam. It reminded me a lot of the Amelia Peabody series that I loved when I was a teenager and into my early 20s and late mid 20s. I just loved that series. And Veronica and Stoker's interactions remind me a lot of Amelia and Emerson's interactions and the way they would butt heads and things. And just so much fun and so over the top in just all the things that happen. Nothing normal happens in these people's lives, but it was just so much fun. And I just really, really love that genre. And I am really looking forward to continuing that series. It's a fairly long series. I think there's 8 books out now. And so I'm really looking forward to continuing that one. Coming in at number 8 is one that is quite different from the last one. And that is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. Now, Kindred follows a young Black woman in the 1970s named Dana. She and her new husband have just moved into this home, and they're starting to organize their home, when all of a sudden she gets pulled back in time. And the first time it happens, it's just for like a few seconds, and she rescues this child that's drowning. And then she gets it's a white child down in the antebellum South. And this family, or the father, comes and he aims a gun at her because, of course, here's this Black woman who's with his son and he doesn't know what's going on and everything. And she goes back to the future. And throughout the story, she keeps getting called back to the past, and there's some connection to this child. His name is Rufus. And he's the son of a plantation owner. And she keeps getting called back when he's in danger. And so there's some kind of a connection over time that's happening between the two of them. But each time that she ends up going back, it's further into the future, and she's there for longer. So over the course of the story, Rufus is growing up and she's there for longer each time, which is, of course, very dangerous because she is a Black woman and she's now in the pre-Civil War South, and having to deal with what's going on down there when she is a modern woman who is not used to being treated like the slaves were treated back then. So it was such a good book. I just found that Octavia E. Butler's writing was so compelling. I could not put that book down. I think I read it over the course of 2 days because I just could not put it down. And when I finally got to the end, I closed it and I honestly was like, wow, that was wow. It dealt with such important topics, the issues surrounding slavery, surrounding your freedom, and the way people were treated, the relationships between characters, and the relationships, modern relationships versus relationships back then. And it was such a good book, the such deep topics. And it was tragic and difficult to read in places, but it was also hopeful in places. And I just really, really found that book interesting. I'd like to read more of her stuff as well, and just see what I think of it, because I definitely enjoyed Kindred. Coming in at number 7 is a nonfiction book, one of the few nonfictions that I have on the list. I did read about 20 nonfiction books this year, but this one is called What I Mean When I Say I'm Autistic by Annie Kotowitz. This book is essentially both a memoir and a discussion on autism. It specifically is discussing autism in women and why women are not diagnosed as often as men, how autism manifests in women differently than in men, and all those sorts of things to do with that level of neurodivergence. And sorry, the cats are shaking things again. Elvis, can you stop it? And this one I found extremely helpful. I think I've mentioned it several times, but I am in the process of discovering my neurodivergence and accepting things about myself that I have suspected for a long time, but haven't looked into in detail. So I did read quite a few books about autism and neurodivergence this year. And this one was my favorite. I found that the way she wrote was very, very readable. The descriptions that she used and the examples from her own life were very easy to follow and very helpful and applicable, is what I found, because I read some other ones where it was kind of very high level, and these people who their neurodivergence isn't really a hindrance to them so much as if you can embrace this, you can be successful and all these sorts of things. Whereas this one really spoke to me as someone who struggles a lot with certain aspects of public life. And so I just found it an extremely useful book, extremely well written, very helpful. What do you think? Do you find books helpful? So that one came in at number 7. Now, at number 6, I have an entire series. So I actually have just one of them here because it's the one that we had out from the library still. And this is the Raven and Fisher series by Ambrose Parry. I read 3 books in this series this year. There is a 4th one, or no, there's actually 5 full books out and a novella that came out this past year. And then I looked and there is a 6th book coming out next year. So I'm really excited about that because I really ended up enjoying this series. The 3 books that I read, there's The Way of All Flesh, which is the first one. I gave that one 4.5 stars. The Art of Dying, the second one was 4 stars. And A Corruption of Blood, this one, the third one, was 5 stars. And I have a feeling reading it a second time, which I'm definitely going to reread this series multiple times, I think I would probably give them all 5 stars just because now at this point I've really fallen in love with the characters. So these books are set in the 1850s in Edinburgh, and they follow the medical community there because your main character is Will Raven. He is, in the first book, he is a medical student, and he is just going to be starting his apprenticeship with Dr. Simpson, who is the man who discovered chloroform and started advocating for its use during surgery and amputations and that sort of thing. So you get a lot of really interesting medical information out of these books. I find it very fascinating the way that medicine was handled back then, the attitudes of people towards medicine, and in particular towards using anesthesia, and especially towards using anesthesia in birth, because there was a lot of religious opposition to the use of anesthesia in birth because it was supposed to be a travail for the woman and stuff. But these are mystery stories. And so in the first one, you have Will, who's just started working with Professor Simpson as an assistant. But he discovered that a friend of his, who happened to be a prostitute, was murdered, and it looked like some type of poison by the way that she looked when he found her. And so he decides that because the cops aren't going to look into it because nobody cares about people of the lower class. So he decides that he's going to try and find out what happened. When he gets to Dr. Simpson's place, he also meets Sarah Fisher. She is a housemaid who loves learning and wants to be more than a housemaid. She is such an interesting character for the time period. I love the way they've written her because she wants to be more. She actually wants to be a doctor, but she is a housemaid. But she's not one of those women who will just do whatever you tell her to do, even though in the time that's what people wanted. And so Sarah is a super interesting character. She also has a friend. It's another housemaid from a different house that has gone missing. And so she's looking into that, and the two of them end up helping each other. But there's a lot of conflict between them as well. I found in particular, I really, really appreciated Raven's growth arc. He starts out, the first couple books were rated a little bit lower for me because for me, at the beginning, he was quite an unlikable character. I didn't like his attitudes towards certain things, in particular towards the position of women in the world and everything. But it was very suiting for the time. But as he meets Sarah and starts to work with her, his growth arc takes a really good turn. I really genuinely love him as a character. And Sarah is such a neat character as well. By the time you get to this third book, there's so much to do with the complex relationships. It's not just a straight up two people fall in love and that's the end of it kind of thing. They're very complex relationships. There's a lot of conflict and just overall, the characters are so good in that series. I really, really enjoy them. And I love all the medical history and that sort of thing. I read a lot of mysteries and I read a lot of historical. And if it's historical and mystery put together, that's the recipe for one of my favorite things. What do you think, Rachel? All right, we are on to the top 5. So let's start with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is another historical, and that is Hood by Stephen Lawhead. This is the first book in a trilogy that is a retelling of the Robin Hood story. But what Stephen Lawhead has done is taken the Robin Hood legend and moved it from Sherwood Forest in England to the thick forests in Wales. And he has made Robin a Welsh prince named Bran. So in this first book, you meet Bran, and he is not a very likable character at the beginning. He's very much a layabout, and his father is the king of a very small kingdom. Like Wales at the time was divided into a lot of small kingdoms. This is in the time after William the Conqueror. William the Conqueror's son is the king of England. And Bran's father goes on his way to London to pay tribute to the king and swear his loyalty. But he is ambushed on the way by the Norman forces, and they are all murdered except for one man. And from there, Bran's story really takes off. His growth arc, again, I talk a lot about growth arcs, but being a writer, that's one of the most important things to me, is that you see growth in the character. And Bran really grows a lot in this book. He ends up becoming a character that I really, really care about. He begins by trying to solve things in the appropriate legal way, and of course that doesn't work, and so he ends up with a group of refugees from his kingdom. They end up starting to fight back, and it is so well written. I love the writing style in this. It is a very lyrical writing style. I just found the descriptions to be so lyrical and poetic, and in some books that doesn't work for me if it comes across as like, the pretentious sort of lyrical writing, but in this it's just beautiful lyrical writing. And there's enough action and adventure and excellent characters that it just, all of that combined together made this book just one of my favorites. I really, really ate this up. And I ended up getting this one and the 2 sequels for Christmas. So I am going to definitely be reading those in this next year, and hoping that I enjoy the other 2 books in the trilogy as much as this one. Coming in at number 4, I don't have this one with me right now because I lent it to someone. But coming in at number 4 is another series. If I read multiple books in a series, I kind of put them together in this list. But in number 4 is The House in the Cerulean Sea and Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which was its sequel by T.J. Klune. I found this story to be my feel-good story of the year. The story follows Linus Baker. He is a caseworker for the Department of Magical Youth in this world. And in this world, children who have magic are taken away and sent to these essentially orphanages where they're raised. And Linus and caseworkers like him are sent out to these orphanages to make sure that these children are being looked after and to make sure that there's nothing untoward going on. And Linus thinks he's doing good. He takes his job very seriously. He's very by the book. But then because he's so by the book, he gets selected by the upper management to be sent out to this island in the Cerulean Sea where there is a home. It is run by a man named Arthur Parnassus, who is a very unique character. And it is where some of the most dangerous magical children in the world are kept. And Linus goes out there thinking that his purpose is to make sure that these children are safe and that they're being treated well and everything, when in reality, what management wants is to know if these children are too dangerous to be allowed to exist. So throughout the story, Linus starts to really open up. There's a found family element that is so beautiful. There is the relationship between Arthur and Linus that develops, and just overall, and then the second book continues on where the first one leaves off and is told more from Arthur's point of view. And I just, overall, the whole story, I just fell in love with. I fell in love with these characters so much. The magical kids, I just totally fell in love with them. They are so much fun. I love the found family vibe. It talks about really, really important topics, like how people who are different are treated often in society, and how we should all be treated with respect. And I find that that's a really important topic in today's world. And just overall, the whole story was so heartwarming, so beautiful. And when I was done it, I just kind of hugged the book both times when I read the first one and the second one. And I just absolutely adore that series. And it is going to be a reread series for me when I am feeling down and need something to make me feel better. So that one came in at number 4. At number 3, I have 2 books again. It's the first 2 books in a series, and that is this Bernard Cornwell series. I read The Last Kingdom, which is the first one, and then The Pale Horseman is the second one. I read them both this year. They both got 5 stars from me. The series has, I believe, 13 books in it, and I'm looking forward to reading the next one. This series follows a young man named Uhtred of Bebbanburg. He is a Northumbrian boy at the beginning. He's 10 years old. And this is the time period when the Danes are invading England and trying to take over all the English kingdoms there, the Danish Vikings. So at the beginning of the story, the Danes attack Northumbria, and Uhtred's father is killed in the battle, and Uhtred is captured by a Viking named Ragnar. But Ragnar sees Uhtred's spirit, and because he doesn't back down, he tries to fight this big Viking warrior, even though he's a 10-year-old boy and everything. And so he decides to take him alive, and he raises him as one of his own family. So that's where the story starts, and then it follows Uhtred throughout. This one, it ends when he's about 19, and then this one takes place when he's, I think, like 20, 21. And the series follows him throughout his life and his connections with the kings of England and everything. His destiny ends up being intertwined with the King Alfred of Wessex, who is the king of the last kingdom that was standing against the Danes during that period. Even though Uhtred and Alfred do not like each other and do not get along very well. Alfred is very pious and thinks that they should, kill all the pagans and everything, whereas Uhtred, because he was raised by the Vikings, is a pagan and believes in the Norse gods and that sort of thing. So there's always that conflict going on. But overall, the biggest thing that I love about this series is Bernard Cornwell's writing. He is such a good storyteller. From the very beginning, you just want to read more. I love his descriptions. I love the pacing of the story. He keeps you wanting to turn the pages. He gives you breaks when you need breaks from the action. He keeps you going when you need to keep going. I have a kitten attacking my stuff. He keeps you going when you need to keep going. He gives you breaks when you need breaks. He's really good at his pacing. In this one, when I was reading the final battle scene, I don't know if I breathed that entire time when I was reading the scene. When I was done, I was like, like, it's so good. I really enjoy Uhtred's character. The side characters are very interesting. The history is interesting. The battle scenes are very, very well written. Overall, it's a genuinely good story, told very well by a master storyteller. And I am really looking forward to continuing the series over the next little while and reading the whole thing. It's one of my favorite time periods to read about is the Viking Age. And so this is right up my alley. And again, like I say, Bernard Cornwell is such a good storyteller. I do want to check out his other main series. That's it's a series called Sharp, and it starts with Sharp's Tiger, I believe is the name of the first one. And it's kind of a naval warfare sort of series, I think. And I love those sorts of things. So that series came in at number 3. So now, Little Pepper, we are down to our top 2. What do you think? What do you think made the top 2? Okay, so coming in at number 2 is one that will surprise no one, but it might surprise you where it ended up on my list, that it was number 2 and not number 1. And I had a really hard time choosing between this one and the one that I picked for number one. And that is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library by Michiko Oyama, translated by Alison Watts. This is a Japanese bit of, it's that what they call healing fiction. It is a novel that is set in Tokyo. You're following this group of people who all are from different walks of life. Each chapter is told by one person. They're all from different walks of life, and somehow they end up finding themselves in this little community center in Tokyo where they end up at the library. The library is run by a librarian named Sayuri Komachi. She is a really unique character. She's very interesting, and people are very drawn to her when they first meet her. They're very drawn to her. But what happens is each of these people comes to her asking for a book recommendation, and she's the reference librarian. So each of these people is coming asking for a book recommendation to do with something to do with their lives. So like one guy, he's trying to learn a new card game. Another one, she's trying to learn some computer skills, all these sorts of things. So what Sayuri Komachi does is she prints out a list of books from the library that would work for these people. But always at the bottom of the list is an extra book. And it's something that's totally unrelated to what they asked about. But the person ends up taking out that book, and somehow it leads them in the steps that they need to take to change their life for the better. And I loved this book, not just because of I liked the writing style, and it was a very heartwarming story. All the characters kind of ended up being interconnected somehow. And, but the biggest thing with this book is it really spoke to me. I found I could see bits of myself in each of the characters. And so it was very, it reached me at a time when I really needed it. I read this one early in January, and I've been struggling for the last about 4 years with rather severe depression and anxiety and some things like that. And this book just reached me at the right time. And I found little bits of encouragement in each of the stories for each of the people, even if I didn't necessarily associate with everything to do with each of the characters. I still found bits of their story that really reached me and gave me encouragement. And for the life of me, if I could meet a fictional character in real life, I would love to meet this librarian and talk to her, because I just have a feeling that she could help you through a lot of things. So anyways, that ended up being the second book on my list. So now here we are with up to the number one, my best book of 2024, drumroll. And it is actually a trilogy. I read all three of them this year, which is rare for me to actually read through a trilogy. That's one of my goals for next year, is to work on that. And that is the Aaron Falk trilogy by Jane Harper. So you have The Dry, which is the first one, Force of Nature is the second one, and Exiles is the final book in the trilogy. And in particular, The Dry was my favorite book of the year. This one follows Aaron Falk. It's set in Australia. Aaron Falk is a federal agent working for the government in Melbourne. He researches financial crimes. In the first book, Aaron ends up going back to his small hometown that he and his father left when he was a teenager for reasons, which you find out in the story. And he is very unwelcome there. But he goes back because his best friend from when he was growing up has murdered his wife and son and then killed himself. Aaron is essentially blackmailed into going back by the young man's father, who wants Aaron to look into it because he doesn't think that his son would have done this. So that's how the story begins. And you end up following three different timelines in the book. And Jane Harper is just a master of weaving timelines. That's one thing that I just really fell in love with her writing. She does it in this one and in the second one. And then not so much in the third one, but in the first and second she does, where you get things in different timelines, and she just weaves it together so perfectly. So in this one, you're getting Aaron's story, present day. You're getting the story of what happened when the murder happened. And then you're also getting the story of what happened when Aaron was a teenager. And it is so well written. I love her descriptions. She's very vivid with her descriptions. This one takes place in a period of extreme drought, and you could just feel it when you were reading it. It is such a vivid setting that she paints throughout this whole book, and then continues it in the other ones. Like the settings were so vivid in those ones as well. And I just fell in love with Aaron as a character. I really, really, especially in this first one, I just love his character. He's such a, he's a damaged character, which of course always leads you to really care about that character and you want the best for them. And so seeing him working through all this stuff from his past and everything, I just absolutely fell in love with him. And then his character arc as it continues through the other two books was just excellent. And I absolutely loved the way she wrapped up the series. It was a perfect ending to the trilogy. The characters were so good. You meet a character in the first one that ends up also in the third one, and he's another character that I really, really enjoy. And I just, overall, this whole trilogy was so good, and I'm going to read it multiple times, and I'm now going to read everything that Jane Harper puts out. I've already purchased her one, The Lost Man, and then she has one called The Survivors that I need to get. But I will be reading anything that Jane Harper puts out from now on. This book was absolutely my favorite book of the year, and this whole trilogy was my favorite reading experience of the year. So yeah, definitely highly, highly, highly recommend The Dry by Jane Harper and Force of Nature and Exiles. This trilogy was so good, and I just absolutely adore it. So that is my top 15 for 2024. I'm sorry if this video ends up being a little bit long. I do tend to babble on when I'm talking about things that I really enjoy. So let me know down in the comments what your top book of the year was. I'd be really curious to find out, because I'd be curious to try it. And also let me know if you've read any of these and what your thoughts were on them. And I will see you guys soon. My next video will probably be in the new year, because I think this is going to be my last video for 2024. And then we're going to be going into 2025 with my goals and future plans for 2025. So I will see you guys soon on my next video. Merry Christmas, and yeah, we'll see you guys in the new year. Bye.